Social media is a tool used by many for various reasons, but a new phenomenon is that it's brought us closer to those rich and famous in the world of glitz and glamour, giving us a sense of familiarity. But how does this one-sided relationship affect one's deen? For this and more, stay tuned to Women's AM. Assalamu alaikum, my dear sisters, and welcome to Women's AM. It's a show that brings you news, discussion, tips, and much more. In today's show, we have our roundup on the day's stories of interest in News Bites. Also, in our second segment, we'll be discussing fangirls and her views, as well as advice in Daily Dilemma in our last segment. I'm your host, Ayan, and joining me on the panel today, we have the lovely sisters Hassana, Zainab, and our special guest, Sister Sultana Parveen. How are you guys? Alhamdulillah. Everyone feeling good?
Good.
MashaAllah. I was just thinking, because we're always aiming for the akhirah, I was thinking once, inshallah, we get to Jannah, who would we most like to meet? So I'll start off with you, Sister Sultana.
That's a really good question. Well, I'd say probably Khalid bin Walid.
Oh, yeah?
Because he's just so... he's just because of what we know about him, which was that he was such a kind of fearsome personality. He was unrivaled really in his personality, and you know, Islam recognised that when he embraced the Deen, and it would just be really interesting to to meet him in person and see what he's like in person, because we, like all of the great Sahaba, you hear about these people and you just wonder what would they be like to meet, what kind of conversations would you have with them, and what would what kind of personality traits do they really have? I mean, it's one thing to read about them, but it'd be a completely different experience to kind of
that's
speak to them.
not one that I've heard before, Khalid bin Walid, but I can understand it, yeah, mashallah. What about you, Hassana?
Safiya radiallahu anha, the aunt of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was just awesome. When you read about her, I was just like, wow, this is what you called an incredible woman. She was like an amazing strategist. She used to plan things, organise things, and especially she used to rally all of the women together. She was definitely a personality that brought people together. She had an incredible strength of character. I think it's in the name actually, because my sister's called Safiya, and she's definitely a rallier too. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. What about you, Zainab?
This is actually too hard to answer because I've got kind of visions for each one in my head. So, like, I want to sit in Khadija radiallahu anha's kitchen and drink tea while she just talks, and I just listen to her, because I see her like she's an auntie in my head. Umar radiallahu anhu, being able to go and sit with Sahaba while they talk and just listen in. I've just got all these like visions in my head. So. That's
SubhanAllah. You know what? That's really nice, because the fact that you're saying just having tea in the kitchen, I think that's one of the things that we miss, isn't it? That all of these Sahabiya were human beings at the end of the day. So they did the normal things. I think for me, mine isn't as like, mashallah, as great as your ideas, but I was thinking my ancestors that have passed, and having to sit down with them and kind of knowing about their journey through life, because it's different knowing your ancestors by name and then actually knowing something about them that's a bit more personal. So I think that's one of the things that I'd like to do, inshallah. But anyway, jazakallah khair for that. Now let's move on to our next segment of the show, News Bites. In this segment, we take a look at the day's stories of interest and we discuss what's been happening around the world. So I'm going to start off with you, Zainab, because you're looking at me. And what article have you got for us today?
Definitely. From The Guardian, the kindness of Muslim men who helped me leave behind my miserable marriage. Sounds really sad, but it's actually quite inspiring and motivating story. She was separated this lady was separated for a long time from her husband. It was really, a lot of it had to do with herself. She didn't want to give up on this marriage. She'd never failed at anything before, so she just wanted to keep at it, but it just wasn't working, and it was basically an abusive marriage. Even her ex was reluctant to divorce, saying that's not from my culture, it's from, you're British born, you're westernized, that's something you believe in, I don't believe in that. So it was interesting how lots of different men in her life, her father, her brothers, and other people that she knew, who actually motivated her to come out of something that was really not good for either of the people involved. And even she was talking about even the imam who said that she shouldn't put up with this kind of behaviour. That it was really good how he outlined it, that marriage is supposed to be about kindness and love. And if you're unable to do that, and if you're unable to provide that, then you're supposed to separate in kindness. And you can see from so many different places she was motivated to do what was right for the two of them. But it was interesting how she shows the other side. When she was then divorced, these British-born Pakistani relatives that she was talking about, who basically spoke down to her and kind of were a bit mean about it, telling her to think about how she ended up in that predicament, that it was because there was little feminine that they find about her, that she wasn't a true Pakistani woman. All this kind of, these kind of points were made.
Yes, SubhanAllah. I mean, Sister Sultana, I mean, talking about things like, her extended family were making comments and things like that. And we find that, SubhanAllah, that in our communities, people tend to look down on divorce, where in actuality, it's allowed, it's halal in Islam. Yeah. I mean, what's your take on this?
I think that women more than men, even though men do face this as well, there's so much cultural baggage that's always attributed to the word divorce. So if somebody is stuck in a really, really problematic marriage, abusive and what have you, then they will stop themselves from getting divorced purely and mostly because they don't have any support. And that's a large part of why people stay together in bad marriages. Yeah. But the kind of taboo that is around divorce is really, it's quite shocking, because in Islam there is no such taboo. It's not something which is liked. There is a hadith, however, it's something where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unlike Catholicism or maybe other faiths where it's not considered part of the faith, you are not allowed to divorce. Islam doesn't give you that. It doesn't. It gives you the opportunity to free yourself from such an abusive situation. And that's really a mercy within itself. And also then after that encourages women and men to remarry.
I think with anything, we need to look at how the Prophet ﷺ used to talk about these things, and how did the Sahaba behave? Because I was listening to a talk by my teacher on the Sheikh Akram Nadwi, and he was talking about how the Sahaba used to divorce, and it's actually really interesting and fascinating. They would divorce so amicably. A couple of months later, they would each get married to other people, and they would be absolutely happy and content in that knowledge that it didn't work out. It's okay. It'll work out with other people, inshallah. So I think there needs to be a change in attitude in terms of how we view divorce as well. It doesn't have to be as drawn out and difficult as sometimes we make it.
Yeah, because unfortunately we do tend to mix a lot of culture within our Islam, and this is what kind of holds us back from being able to do things that are halal for us, unfortunately. And it's not just Pakistani communities, but I think you find it in all sorts of communities, that people don't tend to like the idea of divorce because it looks like some sort of failure. Like you'd mentioned, the sister was saying that she felt like a failure, but it isn't, subhanallah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you put the cultural issues to the side, even when women want to escape, from an abusive marriage, what avenues do they have? They have to rely on the kindness of their male relatives.
Yes.
They have to, and even the male relatives of the ex and stuff like that. And this is not the way Islam has chosen to deal with this issue. You're meant to have this judge who you can go to, who can actually enforce the issue, that she shouldn't have to wait around in that way. There are women who, it takes years for them to separate from someone who's really not good for them. It's just another example of how we just don't have a complete Islam around us, and it's detrimental to these women in their lives. It's sad, isn't it?
I mean, it's good to know that, alhamdulillah, Islam gives us this opportunity to separate from someone who isn't good for us, or if we're in a situation that isn't good for us. But we have to also remember that, it's not something that's encouraged, because, we understand that we have to be patient through certain situations, and some things might change. But I think in the example of this sister, because it was such an abusive relationship, it's not one that you have to kind of be patient, because how can you be patient in such a situation? SubhanAllah. Hassan, I believe you've got our next article.
Yeah, and a bit of a slightly lighter note, we've got one here from the Telegraph. The annual wedding gift dilemma is coming to a town near you. Kill me now. This is a really funny one, actually. Wedding season is, of course, approaching. And we know during this time, a lot of people have difficulty deciding what to buy the couple. And I think it's a really big problem, unfortunately. And actually, I'm finding that there's a new trend emerging within the wedding kind of culture. Can you call it that? I don't know. I'm just going to call it that anyway. But what I'm seeing now is a lot of people are turning to these wedding lists. So they have like a list of things which they register online, and then you can pick what you wish to buy them. But the problem is a lot of these things are quite pricey. You know, the gifts tend to start at 150 to 200 pounds. And I think it's, you know, we were talking about this earlier. I think it's difficult for some people to spend that amount on a gift. So what do you do if you're in a situation where you're attending a wedding and the couple has kind of requested something on a wedding list? So I think there's a couple of things here that I want to touch on. For starters, I think we've got ourselves into a situation where weddings have become the main focus. It's all about the wedding day. It's all about the wedding gifts. The reality is that's just one day, you know, of what will, inshallah, be a lifetime together. So really, our focus shouldn't be on the wedding. It should be on the marriage. That's important to know. But also, it does make me think about the couple and their responsibility in all this. If you're a couple and you're going out there and you're requesting these kind of gifts on the people that you're inviting to the wedding, you know, and you're putting that unnecessary burden on them, I think that's not perhaps the wisest thing to do. I think, you know, encouraging people to give gifts and things like that. Alhamdulillah, we know in Islam gift giving is encouraged, and I'll talk about that later. But if somebody wants to give a gift, that's from their own kind of accord.
It's kind of taking away that joy away from wanting to give a gift, even, because you look at the list and you think, whoa, how am I going to afford this?
That's exactly
you know?
it. And I think, you know, sometimes what it comes back to is that even if someone gives you a good dua, that's subhanAllah, there's so much blessing in that. You shouldn't really be looking at the type of gift that they're giving you. The reality is, you know, they're coming, they're attending the wedding, and inshallah, you know, they are, you know, honouring you with their presence there. So that should be enough.
Zainab, what do you think about the whole wedding list?
My issue is not so much with the word wedding list, it's just weddings as a whole, and this kind of expectation, because even if you don't have a wedding list, it's this expectation that you need how much money, you know, that should be given, or how much, you know, it's really about, if you're going to buy them something, it needs to be of a certain amount. And the culture is the word, I think, that's important here. Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, there's a culture with this, and it's just not something that I agree with at all. It's a pressure that's just unnecessary.
It's a pressure, and I was looking into statistics, and I found that each individual wedding guest, they accrue around £400 worth of costs per wedding they attend.
Oh, wow.
And when you look at that figure, that's a lot of money. If you're attending a lot of weddings, you're going to be seriously out of pocket. And, you know, I was looking into this as well, and there's a really interesting quote here from Sister Yasmin Mujahid. She talks about this whole idea of weddings being our main focus and why that's problematic. She says, the lesson you're taught is that the story ends at the wedding, and that's when Jannah or paradise begins. That's when you'll be saved and completed, and everything that was once broken will be fixed. The only problem is that's not where the story ends, that's where it begins. And I think that's something we need to realise. You know, subhanAllah, it's not about the wedding, it's about the relationship that you're building with the other person.
SubhanAllah, I mean, the wedding is the gateway, so it's not the closed door that you kind of knock on and then that's it.
Well, I'm not, you know, putting it down on giving gifts. Gifts is important. It's important to give it, and we know there's numerous hadith that talk about the importance of giving gifts and the love that it builds between.
So the point is, give gifts, but don't demand too much. Inshallah.
That's the point, inshallah.
So another interesting selection there from the sisters. Jazakallah khair for that. And now here's another reminder of this week's competition.
This week on Women's AM, we have another exciting competition for you sisters out there. Up for grabs are these student books by Islamic Studies. For your chance to win these fabulous books, all you have to do is answer the following question. Who led the army intending to destroy the Kaaba with elephants? Is it A. Muawiyah, B. Sahama, C. Abraha, or D. Najashi? To enter, email your answer A, B, C, or D to womensam@islamchannel.tv, along with your name and address and what do you most like about Women's AM. The deadline for entries is Friday the 9th of May 2014 at 4 p.m. All applicants need to be over 18 and residing in the UK. Please note only one entry per person per household. A winner will be randomly selected from correct entries and the winner's name will be announced on Monday's show, so get entering.
We're off to a quick break now, but do stay tuned as after the break we'll be back with our main segment. Okay. We're off to a quick break now, but do stay tuned as after the break we'll be back with our main segment, Her Views, where we discuss fangirls. Don't go anywhere. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. You're watching Women's AM with myself, Ayan, and on the panel joining me we have Sisters Hassana, Zainab, and our special guest today, Sister Sultana Parveen. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. So, mashallah, Sister Sultana, we know that you are a writer, mashallah, and you write an array of things.